The end of reading is here, or so claims The Atlantic. We are talking about adult literacy, are libraries and bookstores going to shut down? Let's talk about all that and more here on the Sweet Tea series. Hey everyone, and welcome back to the Sweet Tea series. My name is Ariana Guajardo. I'm joined today by Cameron Abrams, who is a policy analyst for Next Generation Texas at the Texas Public Policy Foundation. First of all, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me. I've been a big fan for a long time, so I'm happy to be here.
Well, thank you so much. And I've been a fan of your work and following you even before you became one of my colleagues. So how has that been so far, being at TPPF?
You know, when you're at Olive Garden, when you're here, your family, same thing here at the Texas Public Policy Foundation. Since my first day, it's felt like family. Everyone has been so nice, so kind, just incorporated me into everything you guys are doing. So love it.
You know, I have seen a lot of comments about TPPF, both online with people who like and dislike us, but I don't think Olive Garden has ever been mentioned once. So that might be a first. And with your work with Next Generation Texas, obviously you guys are looking at education, and I've had a lot of guests on this show talk about declining literacy rates in our schools, with people not being able to pass or year after year test scores getting lower, especially when it comes to things like reading and math. But are adults also losing the ability to read? Let's talk about this Atlantic article here. You were the one who actually brought it to my attention. So first of all, thank you so much for doing that.
Yeah.
So it begins with talking about how, here I'm going to open it up with this one quote. Americans, once members of a proudly literate society, read much less than they used to. According to the National Endowment for Arts, which conducts the most comprehensive survey of the nation's reading habits, fewer than half of all adults reported having read a book of any kind in 2022, and only 38% read a novel or short story.
Yeah.
That's not that many people reading in an entire year. Did that surprise you?
Honestly, no. I've been researching and looking into this topic for years now. And so to hear facts like that leading a Atlantic article wasn't really shocking, just more confirming a lot of the things that I've been seeing. A little later in the article, it's interesting. It also mentions that despite less people reading, the people that are reading more. And so you had mentioned in your intro, our bookstore is going to close down and things like that. Well, the bookstores aren't going to close down, but they're only being visited by a smaller and smaller group of people, but they are voracious readers.
So those people are crazy book fanatics
Yes.
who are making sure that they stay in business.
Yes.
So when did you first start noticing that trend? Like, why did you get into that area of research?
So prior to coming to TPPF, I was a journalist. And working as a journalist, you're writing articles all day, publishing them online. And at the end of the week, we would get a report. And on that report, it would show us what were our top articles, how long people spent on them, which things were really going viral. And what I began to notice is our most popular articles, people spent the least amount of time on. And so you would see at the top 5 articles, people would spend 15 seconds, 20 seconds, maybe even 5 seconds on an article. So you would spend all day researching, contacting sources, going on the ground, doing interviews, press conferences, write up 1,000, 1,500 words, and people would click on it, read the headline, the subheader, and then move on. And so that was my real first indication that, okay, despite all this whole body of work that is being published online, people really just want bite-sized pieces of information. And so that really triggered me to think, okay, what is leading to this state of illiteracy, basically, that the Atlantic is claiming, and that is showing up in a lot of research. So that's when I really started to get interested into it.
So now that you've had a chance to look into it more, and again, find that weird correlation between what's most popular is the thing that people don't spend time actually reading, something that's interesting that the Atlantic also points out is people are reading a lot. And that's just because every time that you're scrolling online, all the emails and notifications you get throughout the day, there's a lot of words that you're continually coming across. You're just not sitting down and reading a body of work.
Right.
So do you see a connection between those two, or one leading to the other?
Absolutely. I think they're intimately connected. Where we're seeing, just like you mentioned, people are being inundated with information, social media, the internet, emails, the internet, whatever it may be, but it's just an overload. And so they want things condensed down into shorter and shorter, more concise pieces of information. So, for example, what the Atlantic article points out, that something I didn't notice, but they bring up, is sentences have gotten shorter. And so in decades prior, there would be these long, flowing, flowery, using purple prose to explain concepts and ideas in books or novels or even articles in newspapers. But now it's just short chunks of information in these less and less complex structures of sentences. And I think that is a function of our increasingly technological environment, a technological environment that's influenced by algorithms. And so what is the role of an algorithm? To put information in front of you that you want to engage in, but information engagement that keeps you on that website for longer. So as you're scrolling, they want you to keep scrolling. As you're reading, they want you to keep reading, but moving on to more and more articles. So that is leading into what we've been talking about here with people reading less, but also the simplification of a lot of our information.
That, and I think there's also a connection between that and attention spans. So if attention spans are shorter, are you going to be sitting through an entire sentence, or do you need the dopamine hit of a period at the end of that? There's I do have to say, I may be a partial contributor to this. So because we work at a think tank, we work with several people who still love really long sentence structures.
Right.
And when we're working on a script, or if I'm giving any input into an op-ed, myself and the comms team have to be like, that's really nice.
Yeah.
And no one's going to be able to get to the end of that.
Yeah.
So we're shortening things down, splitting things into, again, it's how do we get this information out to the most amount of people? So
yeah,
we participate in that, unfortunately, but that's where we are.
On the craving for the dopamine hit that you mentioned, I feel it too. And it's conversations I have with people in the office, with my friends and my family, when we talk about reading. And there's always that pull of the phone right next to you, right? Even if you're sitting on the couch, laying in bed before going to sleep, and you pick up a book to read, that phone is right there and it's pulling you, and you feel it. And so it's an element of resisting, like getting that short-term hit, so you can engage with long-form content with a book that is really going to nourish and feed your intellectual desires more than that short-form content on X or TikTok or whatever it may be.
So just a piece of, practical advice for what I did last year to get myself to read more. That was one of my goals. And I think I read... it's probably around 35 books last year.
Wow.
But most of them were on my phone. And I realized, I'm really addicted to scrolling.
Yeah.
So I might as well at least try to scroll through a book and see how that works.
Yeah.
But there is something engaging to the amount that you at least, it's because a phone's a smaller screen, the amount that you're having to scroll through. So I found a way to combine the two at least.
No, I do the same thing. I feel like there's a way to hack it. Mm-hmm. Right. One of the things I'll do is I'll read on my iPad, because I know my brain enjoys, I'll say, the scrolling aspect. Mm-hmm. So how do I incorporate that into reading? Well, I can read on my iPad, or you can read on your Kindle. And I'll read on my phone when I'm at the gym, even if I'm on the Stairmaster, put that up. And instead of watching a video or a movie or a show or whatever, you can read on your phone. Mm-hmm. So there's options out there. And
once you get started, it's easier to get going. So I'll give an example. I had like a physical copy of a book and the digital one. And after I started on the digital one, I could find myself moving over to the other one as well. That, and the same thing with audiobooks. So if I started a series audio, it was much easier to pick up the next one physically. And again, flip through actual physical pages.
Yeah, you got to start with where you are.
Right.
And so if you're someone who has struggled to read for your entire life, but you want to start reading, what's the lowest barrier to entry? An audiobook. Just pop it on your way to work, find something that's engaging, and maybe that'll lead to, purchasing a Kindle and reading something on a device. Maybe that engages you to want to buy a physical book. So it's just about incremental steps.
Yeah. Or even talking about the life hacking. I combined the fact that trying to get myself to go to the gym more and read more. So I was listening to audiobooks that I was only allowed to listen to if I was working out at the gym. So if I wanted to know what happened next, I have to be back at the gym. It worked out.
I think that's a great tip.
Yeah. Well, part of the reason I was so excited to have this conversation and that you brought this to my attention is I've been trying to figure out a way to tie in BookTok into an episode for so long, so I feel like I'm a whole year late to part of these conversations. Are you willing to dive into some of the BookTok back end stuff?
I've had conversations about BookTok. I'm happy to get into it. I have not engaged with BookTok itself because I try and stay off TikTok. I have not downloaded
Good
TikTok
advice.
on my phone.
TikTok is not for me. I think I ruined my algorithm the first time I tried it, so I couldn't get into TikTok. Thankfully though, so I'm just an Instagram girly getting BookTok info like 2 weeks too late. Yeah. So for the audience who doesn't know, you're probably in a better spot in your life than I am. But BookTok is this place where all the online girlies are reading, and it's mostly for books that ladies are reading and talking about on TikTok, aka in this subgenre, BookTok. But a lot of those books are the mostly like fantasy, romance,
young
genre.
adult novels.
Right.
Yeah.
Young adults / new adults. There's like all these nuances in their communities in which one they classify. But a lot of these books have a lot of adult content in them, so it seems like that's what a lot of women who are reading now, the things that they're choosing to pick up. But something that was really interesting to me, this is a scandal's a little bit of a dramatic word, but somewhat of a scandal on the BookTok community. Women were talking about the fact that they didn't like books that had a lot of description without a lot of dialogue, and they were revealing they only read the dialogue in these books that they're quote unquote reading. And that's, I mean, the fact that you don't have the attention span to get through anything else other than dialogue is first concerning. In addition to the fact that you've limited yourself to this very interesting genre for an interesting kind of content that you're now telling me that that's the only thing that you're chasing after here.
Yeah.
Does that surprise you at all as well, that that's like people are whittling down reading even more to just, if it's in quotation marks, I'll take a look at it?
Well, BookTok, from what I understand, is a female-dominated space.
Yes.
And the way I think about this, and the way I've talked about this with some of our colleagues here at TPPF, because this is internal conversation. We talked, trying to construct op-eds and things on this topic. But women and men communicate differently. If men and women are going to be seeking out adult content, men are going to go for visual stimulation, whereas women are going for dialogue stimulation. So it's not surprising in that sense. And then there's also been a lot of research done on why women are attracted to the types of themes in these books.
I think Jordan Peterson's talked a lot about that. That's the first
that's where I first heard about it. He talked a lot about this book called A Million Wicked Thoughts, where these Google researchers were aggregating data from Google searches, and what they were finding is women were seeking out like these sort of archetypal images or themes of men, the werewolf, the vampire, the billionaire, those sorts of things. But it's these types of figures that are showing up now again in BookTok. And women are able to create content about that and post it online and get positive responses from it. So it's sort of this self-fulfilling loop here.
The reason that I bring it up, though, in this broader book conversation is if these are the people who are buying books. We were talking about at the beginning that there's a smaller and smaller subset of people buying books.
Yeah.
What I'm now interested in is what books are those people buying and who are those people?
Yeah.
And one of the other things that you've had the chance to write about is the great books and whether or not people are engaging with those. So if people haven't heard of this term before, the great books or these great works, what are those referring to, and how are people engaging or not engaging with them anymore?
Yeah, so the great books is the books of the Western canon. So everything from Greek philosophy, Roman philosophy, to English novels, American novels, and things like that. But there's been a resurgence of great books curriculum, great books curriculum in K through 12, and then also in higher education.
And it's a big part of what makes up the Bluebonnet curriculum, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah. And so it's sort of returning to those foundational texts that gave rise to Western civilization. And the reason why this has become such a pivot point for people as a point of conversation is over the past few decades, there's been a turn away from these great books, mostly on the identity front. You know, these books were written by white men, and we need to introduce a culturally responsive curriculum. And so there's been, again, a turn back to the great books. But the reason why I recently engaged with it is there was this online conversation that was happening about why the great books curriculum is important now, and what is like a conservative, quote, conservative point against the great books. And I took an angle on why the great books curriculum is even seen as conservative or right wing or Republican. It's sort of slapped with this label. And it's because conservatives want to conserve. We want to conserve the Western tradition. We want to conserve American values. And what gave rise to that are these great books. And there, like I mentioned, there's been a turn away from it. Luckily here in Texas with the Bluebonnet curriculum, there's been a turn back. Many universities are incorporating great books curriculum, K through 12. So at least we're having this conversation about why it's important. Hopefully in the future, it'll just become normalized, and it doesn't have to be seen as political. Books, don't need to be political. They just need to be there to lay the foundation for the type of society that gave rise to where we are, and hopefully conserve it and sustain it.
Right. And let's say that someone doesn't even agree with Western philosophy. It's still important to say if we're living in a world founded by Western philosophy that you know where that came from and how we got here.
Absolutely.
If you're going to engage in any kind of thought. And I will say that while you were talking about that, the baby started kicking more. So I think she's really excited to get out and start reading all these books.
Yeah.
But with the talking about the great books, you mentioned this idea of it being a conservative or moving towards that being some kind of conservative victory. Until I was reading your analysis of this online discussion, I had never put together the idea that the great books were conservative. I guess I just thought that this is what belongs to like you said, it's the Western canon. It's what makes up what we reference as a civilization, especially if you're reading older novels when people really were referencing other books. These are what they're pulling from. It's what the point of reference that we share.
Yeah.
I never thought of that as conservative. What do you think has led to that like throwing on a political lens over this when we're looking at it?
Well, I think that just speaks to the victory of the progressive left in the country and how it controls our institutions of higher education, but also entertainment, business, media. It's this entire ethos that views things as explicitly political and through this identity lens. And so if it was made by a man, it should be rejected. If it was written by someone who was white, it should be rejected. And instead of looking at what are the morals and values and ethics that are trying to be portrayed in these great books, those values and morals that gave rise to Western civilization, that allowed for these criticisms to be debated openly and publicly. Well, the ideas of free speech and open expression are in books that are from 2,000 years ago. So to reject those is the cultural victory of the left. And again, luckily, we're having this conversation, so it's still alive. And it's incumbent on those who want to preserve Western civilization and preserve the Western canon and these great books to make a ardent defense of them.
Mm-hmm. So last year, whenever I was talking about how I actively was trying to read more, I was doing a combination of classical literature, some modern stuff, just to keep me my momentum going. But part of that was in response to the fact that I realized there was a lot missing from what I should have had as part of my curriculum, probably in high school, and then at least in college if I hadn't encountered it already. And that just wasn't there. Like, I took an American literacy class in college. I went to UT, and one of the books we were reading was this graphic novel about a woman who is suffering from bipolar disorder.
Right.
And that was part of what we were using our time for. And that was really shocking to me, that there's this huge gap that I have, and that's what we're filling my my time with instead.
Well, that's a perfect example of the attempts of our university systems to remove those foundational texts, take them out, and then replace them with something else.
Right.
They want to recenter these fringe ideologies and these fringe identities, things that are necessary to discuss, but they should not be at the center of our curriculum.
Right. Again, especially for something that's supposed to be part of the quote-unquote core curriculum, because I wasn't an English major, right? We're not trying to expose me to everything under the sun.
Yeah.
But if you are someone who is like me and realize there's a lot missing from what I should know and what I want to engage in, and helping me form my ideas of what got us here as Western civilization, what happens if we don't preserve this, where would you start? How do you start entering into these great books if you're not so lucky to have had the Bluebonnet curriculum?
Yeah, well, I think what's important is a recognition. Like you just mentioned, it requires thinking to yourself, oh, I didn't get the type of education that I probably should have. So first step is recognizing that you didn't get what you should have. Second, like you just asked, where do you look then? There's so many resources online. There's many different websites just purely dedicated to great books curriculum. You can even, if you're here in Texas, look at the Bluebonnet curriculum. If you're a parent, read the books alongside your kid. And so you both can engage with it together, and that can create a better relationship there. And then also, I think you should talk with other people offline, and engage with this in-person dialogue with people and see if you have gone through similar experiences, and maybe you could start up a reading group with you and your friends or you and your family. So there's many different avenues to figure out where things are lacking, where you can find resources. So, the world's your oyster, really. And
I will say, even just text about Western philosophy and like, for example, last year I read Locke's Second Treatise because it's what the attorneys recommended for me, and it wasn't that long, and I really thought that it would be a bigger undertaking to even engage with stuff like that than it actually is.
Yeah, and I'm not telling people the first book they should pick up is War and Peace. Like, don't pick up a giant book that's going to be a huge slog or anything like that. You can pick up shorter philosophical texts. I would even recommend going back to Plato. You can read these short dialogues like the Gorgias, or I always recommend people start with reading the Symposium.
See, this is a lot of stuff that I'm missing still, so I'm like, I think I need to start taking notes.
But yeah, I think, like I said earlier, you got to start with where you are and understand, like, pick something that's short, something that you're going to get through, but something that's going to be engaging as well. So if you like reading novels, pick up a piece of fiction. If you like reading nonfiction, you could pick up a work of philosophy, a shorter work. Wherever your interests lie, go in that direction.
So on the show in the past, I've had a lot of ladies on the show. That's what I'm trying to create is the core audience. But since you're here, I do want to address one other work that you've had, which is what the Atlantic gets wrong about masculinity.
Okay.
And I know this seems like a little bit of a pivot, but I think it does bring stuff back to this conversation of reading. So let me just start here with the quote from the Atlantic, and then I'd like you to give your response. So the Atlantic said, "The American manhood is fragile and precarious thing, shattered by the slightest deviation from ever-shifting norms. Eating, tasting tofu, not eating meat, or maybe eating too much meat." Sorry, I think part of my line was cut off on here.
That's okay.
But tell me a little bit about why that stood out to you, and then let's connect it back to why that's important when we're talking about these education conversations.
So you can see a theme of me responding to the Atlantic in many of their points. But on the masculinity front, the reason why I wanted to write about this is, especially in the article here, is they seem to want to create a version of masculinity that is the sameness with femininity. Social cooperation, really tamping down the sort of masculine spirit that is more reminiscent of ancient versions of masculinity. There's a Greek term for courage that is synonymous with masculinity called andrea, which means taking risk in situations. And they don't want men to take risks anymore. Again, it's been over the course of decades now that our cultural institutions, the media, entertainment, higher education, they have elevated feminine characteristics in females, and really have told men that everything that gives you energy, that you are striving for, is bad. And this has been documented. I mentioned a few different pieces that were published in Compact. People are interested. One of them is called The Lost Generation, where it lists out all these different cultural industries, movies, news, television, that have just explicitly excluded young men. And that's because it's this cultural ideology that is antithetical to what these ancient forms of masculinity were. So how does this appear in reading? Well, it's the recentering of sort of characters in stories, where we see this. I think an example is in Marvel films. Or they are promoting female superheroes over male superheroes, or they are. We can see this in the Odyssey, how they do the race swapping, or they elevate certain characters over others. So it's just a whole reorientation of masculinity that the Atlantic was making an argument for.
The reason why I wanted to tie these together is twofold. One is that if we're looking to solutions from here's where we are now, men don't know how to be men. They don't have figures in their lives even to look to display good, strong masculinity. Engaging with older works, I think, allows you to see what that looks like in the past. But also, if we drift away from that, it makes it easier for the left to construct these narratives. And if you're only engaging with stuff that's new, they are not going to have anything to counter that.
No, I think that's a great point. And that's a great tie-in. It's about returning to those foundational texts, again, that gave rise to Western civilization. And most of the time, when the male is at the center, masculinity is at the center of those stories, they're put into an ambiguous situation, and they have to make a decision, and they have to take a risk of saying this is good or this is bad, this is what we should do, this is what we shouldn't do. And that sort of idea of decision making for young men especially has been dispensed with. And that's sort of what the argument I was making is there needs to be a return to these more ancient forms of masculinity, which appears, like you mentioned, in these great books.
And if people want to find out more about what we're doing in education policy, but also follow along with what you're writing, where can they find you?
Well, they can find me on the Canon. That's where I publish all my op-eds. It's where I've published our research papers.
And if you're not already subscribed to the Canon Online, please do so. You can see him and many others.
Yeah, and then also on X, Cameron S. Abrams. And so those are really the two channels there.
And to follow along with what we're doing in education policy at the Texas Public Policy Foundation, you guys can go to texaspolicy.com. Thank you so much for taking the time to join me here. As soon as more BookTok news comes out, I guess I know the guy who I have to go to.
Come down to the third floor. I'm there.
Well, thank you so much again, everyone else. We'll see you next time.